Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, cargo shorts, quarterbacks, and spring football. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Always glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get them casts. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We are on the road again, coming to you from parts unknown, but what we know is going down in the LBK this week, Chris. Football. Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders back at it, springtime edition. I got to tell you, just to be consistent, I've always been a little skeptical of springtime results and what we put in it versus what we get out of it. But I got to tell you, that skepticism impacted positively a little bit by momentum in the previous year. There are plenty of years where you're looking for some new things to appear on the horizon because there hadn't been a whole lot to enjoy in a previous season. That's not the case this time around, as you came up with some good things in year number one, and really interested to see what they can come up with here in the spring. And I don't know, but it kind of does feel like, say for some very specific positions we'll get to, you've got quite a few battles that could be playing out here through the spring, and I would say definitely extending on in some cases into fall camp as well.
Yeah, and Cowan, I agree with you. Spring football, it is what it is. It's like this one of these necessary things that it just almost like a tease. I think that's just what it is, and you just hope that nobody gets hurt, and you try to start to figure some things out. But what they're going to practice today for the first time, and I think one of the things that, just to set the scene a little bit, I don't think they'll be using the stadium much just because of the renovations. I think the turf is still mostly torn up on that one end of the field. So you'll be, really on that practice field or those two practice fields and in the indoor, depending on the weather. And we know that when you skip to the end, that the spring game will be at Lowry Field, one of the high school stadiums here in Lubbock. But like today, when they get out there, I think you're going to hear, you mentioned the word momentum. I think you'll hear a lot about that. You're going to hear a lot about, momentum carrying through their first part of the offseason. I think you're going to hear a lot about weight gain and weight loss depending on various players, because that's what, by starting spring after spring break, spring football, I should say, it gives the strength coaches that many more weeks of a big giant block of time to really work on guys' bodies. I think you're going to hear a lot about several players that are going to miss the spring because they're rehabbing from, a surgery or whatever. I think, and guys like Tony Bradford, I think are going to miss the spring. Guys like Tyler Owens. I mean, some of these main starter type guys, that will miss the spring because of injury of sorts. And so those are the kinds of things, though, that when we set the scene for the beginning of this, that you'll start to hear. And as far as position battles go, there's going to be a lot of those, I think, no matter where you look. So, but you to get through it, you got to start it at some point, and because it's just a giant tease for the real thing come the fall.
Yeah, everybody gets tired of playing with themselves eventually. You want to hit somebody in a different colored shirt. So it is what it is, but it's an opportunity to get in work. And obviously it also is what you make of it, right? I'm sure there are teams and programs out there that take great advantage of it, make it something. And I'm sure there are some others who maybe don't take as much away from it. So a lot of that probably, if I had to guess, incumbent upon those players themselves, Chris, hopefully some team leadership and some veteran experience. A couple of guys you just mentioned there. So if they're not participating, I don't know how it impacts that necessarily, but I think you have to rely on some of those vets to understand how to get through this process that can seem, I don't know, maybe a little bit frustrating or monotonous, I guess, at certain times. I could be wrong too. Maybe they're just excited to get back to football, but I think it does take some, some self-starter aspect, I guess, to get through some of these days.
Well, and that's the beauty of who you have running this program right now, because it's like every day is the very first day with him over there, man. And it's this infectious, like, I don't know. I don't know how many years he can keep up this pace or this energy level. I just think at some level that's who he is. But you just don't. It doesn't matter whether it's a windy Tuesday or whether it's a meaningful scrimmage. It all feels the same, and he's loud, he's energetic, he's positive, he coaches hard, and I think that it's easy for those guys to kind of get through some of that stuff when they see that their head coach is excited to be out there as much as he is, because he's genuinely excited, which is why I think that they play so hard for him, because he does come off as very genuine, and I think that's a big component to what he's trying to build.
Is this going to be the type of spring, Chris, that features a number of, and I'm not sure what NCAA regulation allows me to describe them as, so I throw myself at the mercy of the court, Your Honor. But open scrimmages, actually titled and labeled spring games, trips to Midland. I mean, some of these various experiences we've had in some years gone by. Trip to Frisco, I think, once upon a time. Do you anticipate anything kind of out of the ordinary being a part of this spring? Is that stuff still yet to be revealed, or where are we at there?
This will entirely take place in Lubbock, Texas. I think there was you can say a lot of things about Tech athletics. I think that one of the things they did right there for a period of time is they tried to take the show on the road a little bit and kind of break up the monotony and hit a different component of the fan base with spring football, which is why you mentioned some of those different trips that you take. And I think the people in Midland, Odessa area, they kind of helped make that happen financially. There was interest there. I think the Frisco deal, but I think that at some level it had also run its course. And so I think this is a spring where you'll basically be entirely in Lubbock, and you'll have every practice on your campus with the exception of the very last one, which would be the spring game, which is at Lowry Field right there on the loop when you come into town. And I think that that's going to be one of the interesting things as everybody starts to go over there and cover this stuff or whatever. You're going to start to see some of those renovations and things in your face, having to park at different places, noticing that there was a big giant building that was there the last time you were over there that's no longer standing at all, and you could just look right into the stadium and skateboard right down into it if you wanted to. So yeah, but yeah, it will all be in Lubbock, I think, this spring for sure.
Oh, the precious media might be inconvenienced with their precious parking. Thoughts and prayers as they experience this trying time. And I know that you're not in that category, Chris, because I think Joey actually drives you up there, doesn't he? He can pick you up. And
I have a seat in his special golf cart. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, no, I don't. I'd have to park where everybody else does for sure.
What's do you have any recollections over the years? Because we have gone through a few tenures now as your tenure, right there on the front line observing these things commenced a few decades ago. I don't want to tell all the tales as far as how long it's been going on, but you've seen a lot play out, and that includes several coaching administrations. Do you have recollections from like the feel or tone of a Mike Leach spring camp through some of what we saw, Tuberville, Kingsbury, Wells, whoever it might be that maybe stood out in one way or another? But first, today's episode brought to you by America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. And now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. Become a new customer because new customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. Safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, 3 points drained if basketball is your thing, or all points in between, underwater basket weaving anyone. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with that same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Do you have recollections from like the feel or tone of a Mike Leach spring camp through some of what we saw, Tuberville, Kingsbury, Wells, whoever it might be that maybe stood out in one way or another?
Well, I think what's fascinating is you mentioned a bunch of guys right there, and I think what's fascinating about the spring is that each time one of those guys showed up, the first chance you had to watch what they were about was the spring. And I think there was always a lot of anticipation about, okay, how does this guy do things? Is he a yeller? Is he a positive guy? Is he very organized? Or they're going to do this on offense or this on defense? I mean, they're just those kinds of things. What I guess I remember from Tuberville was that when he showed up, all he would talk about every day to the media, and he was the only guy. I think Joey's very accessible, but Tuberville was basically available after every single practice. And he would always start talking about during or to the media about the weather. Man, it sure is hot out here. Man, sure is cold. Or man, we got a front rolling in here. And I was like, what is his deal with the weather? Because it was like a crutch of sorts, in that it was like, I don't know if he knew what was going on with the defensive line or who the backup quarterback was going to be, but he damn sure knew what temperature it was and if he was cold or too hot or whatever. But
he's just going country bumpkin, classic Alabama senator. Warm out today, warm out yesterday too. And also, when the ears are that size, you're dialed into some barometric changes that the rest of us aren't. I think you're just a little bit more sensitive to some weather patterns there.
Yeah,
but I have to imagine, as far as like being buttoned up or at some various points, like this is Fort Knox spring camp versus not. What was the Leach camp? I mean, I know that was a different era, but what was the looseness level of a Mike Leach spring camp as far as access or just generally the way that it was conducted?
Yeah, and that was a much different time in the world of the way that everything was covered and all those things. There wasn't near as much, paranoia, back then. But, when Mike first started, I mean, it was, come out here, man. Do whatever you want, write whatever you want, say whatever you want, come one, come all. And then as years would go along, I think that, well, then Twitter shows up and you got, all this stuff going on and people start writing, hey man, so-and-so just went down with a serious knee injury. And then Lyle Setensich is like, hey, go look and see who's in that tower across the street and see if there's anybody spying on us.
Citibank, baby.
Yeah, that's right. And so, and that may have been in August, but the point still stands. Is that the later it went, there was more paranoia, but that wasn't, he wasn't alone, or that they weren't alone. And that's just kind of the way it is everywhere. I don't never know if any of that matters a lick or not. If you come out there and watch everything that you do, if you have a big time advantage on personnel groups or play calls or signals or whatever, because I just remember when Nebraska was really good and they were running the wishbone, it's like they could shout out, hey, we're running right, good luck. And they would just run right over you, even if you knew it was coming. So I don't know, but that changed as the years would go along with him. But it was used to be just wide open, like fall camp, spring practice, whatever. It was just show up, enjoy yourself, put on some sunscreen and get after it.
We were all just boys in cargo shorts at that time.
Yes, we were.
Including the head coach. So it was good company. Before we get out of here, Chris, let's get to the Red Raiders, because I know we have yet to learn anything. And we're just sitting here kind of alluding to the fact that you never know quite what you're going to learn within a spring camp. But as we're having this conversation, and as a majority, I would guess, of you are digesting this conversation, we hadn't had an actual practice take place yet, but there are some obvious points of interest. I know it's real sexy for every podcast, every such and such, to start out with the quarterbacks. We all want to talk quarterbacks, but Locked On Texas Tech ain't about that beauty contest. We're outside the box thinkers, and that's why we're starting with the deep snapper positional battle. Just kidding. Let's go to the quarterbacks, Chris. You know that it's where the money is made. And man, aside from just the general interest of any quarterback offseason, this offseason following the season you just had, which is one of the more interesting notes as to its success, the fact that you were, playing with quarterback after quarterback, and you thought this guy was maybe going to be there for a while, but nope, then we're switching it up here. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like it. I'm not sure that I have, but the quarterback conversation seems to have a clear and established hierarchy. But as probably we all know, based on last year's experience, even with that, the odds that you're going to see multiple used intentionally or in emergency situations, very high, right? So still very, very interested to see guys like Shuck and Morton get into some action this spring.
Yeah, and I do think that you'll get a legit competition there, and I think that's the only way Zach Kitley will do it, and Joey McGuire wants it that way.
So am I wrong to say there is a hierarchy in the way I describe it? Because
I think that it's best to describe it this way. Probably fair to say that Tyler Shuck needs to be beaten out. But I will say that I bet you don't ever hear anybody say Tyler Shuck is our starting quarterback right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's good for Tyler. It's good for Barron. I think that the competition, or just kind of iron sharp as iron kind of thought process of letting this thing go on, and I just think it's good for all parties, and it makes everybody better. But at some point, you'll have to decide who that is. But I bet we're a ways off from that, from at least. And again, I could be wrong, and Joey could walk out there today and be like, "Yeah, Tyler's the starting quarterback." But I just don't think that. I just don't think that will happen. I think that you'll get a healthy competition that could go into August. They may know who they want, but look, we know who 1 and 2 is, and I say this in that both of these dudes could absolutely be your starting quarterback, and you're going to be just fine. Yeah. And we may even get some of, you're going to see both of them. You're going to see both of them. I don't think you're going to hear, we'll see all 3 of them, because I don't think they'll put Jake Strong in the conversation like they did with Donovan Smith, and they're going to work to try to create packages to get everybody on the field at the same time and all that, which, again, as we documented last fall, that was a real thing. I think that, skill sets and all that, trying to get your playmakers on the field, and they just never were able to use a lot of it because of injuries and things like that. But you clearly know who your top 2 guys are, and just let them get after it.
Now that we've got some dust settled as it relates to the quarterbacks, and at least for the time being, transfer decisions and things like that, anything surprise you about the guys that are here, the guys that aren't here, or how that played out? Or do you think that was to script, given what last season held for those guys, that being Smith, Shuck, and Morton?
Yeah. Okay. So ask me again, like what you're saying, but Donovan Smith not being here?
Yeah, we just wind up with Shuck, Morton here, Smith not. And I don't know. I guess I had some inclination that maybe I don't know if I'd call it a likelihood, but I guess I was bracing for you to only get one of those guys
right
back in the mix. So were you surprised that, if it was Shuck, I guess maybe the combination, Shuck and Morton, and not Shuck and Smith, or Morton and Smith, or, something along those lines?
I think that, look, if you were to, there's nothing against Donovan here. I think he's a world-class human. He's got a big-time smile. He's a hell of a playmaker. I think he could do a variety of things for a football team, not just play quarterback. But if you were given the choice of who you would want to come back of the 3, if you could keep 2 of them going into this season, I think you got the right 2 guys. And the reason I say that is, and the answer kind of changed a bit, because I think we saw, look, there was a time when you're like, man, Tyler can't stay healthy. But then I think you really got to see when he won those 4 games, what he's about and what he can do. And he's an alpha male, man. I mean, there's just no doubt when you go over there in the locker room, he commands quite a presence, and he kind of demands respect. He gives guys a hard time. He shows up early, stays late, all those things. But the Barron component is awesome, because he's good enough to start for you, but he also is the future. Like, you already know, kind of like, okay, no matter what happens this year, Barron, it's all in front of him. He's still got multiple years left after this one. And so you're kind of getting your cake and eating it too a little bit. And I love cake and I love eating it. So, I mean, why not have Tyler and Barron here?
Well, and you're touching on that with Morton. I guess that's the part that took me by surprise, or whatever way you want to call it. Is Shuck remaining here and Morton still being willing, I guess, to compete? Because I thought he showed plenty last year to give him the feeling, not that he wouldn't have it before about himself, but him the feeling, or anyone watching, that this guy can win football games at the highest level, and he can be some piece that you can invest in or build around. He's got what it takes. And maybe I'm just a little bit too jaded by the immediacy with which some of these things happen after that's revealed, and then a starting job is not just handed over, I guess, or like committed to for the next period of time. And when I thought Tech was Shuck's only landing spot on the college level. I didn't think he was going somewhere else. I thought maybe NFL prospects or Texas Tech. But when that happened, I guess, Chris, I was almost bracing for that to like guarantee me that Morton was going to be on the move. And turns out I was just dead wrong. I guess I'm not quite sure why that is, though. Why do you think that Barron Morton was so willing still to know with such a vet who did finish last season in the way that he did, and Tyler Shuck, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to compete and invest in Texas Tech? Why do you think that Barron Morton was so willing still to know with such a vet who did finish last season in the way that he did, and Tyler Shuck, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to compete and invest in Texas Tech?
I think because he really loves this place and he loves Zach Kitley, and I think that he's not being impatient. I think some people came after him and gave him some things to think about, whether it was legally or illegally, like coming after him. I say that like via the portal and all those things.
Sure.
I think there was interest shown to him. And I think that this is where he wants to be. And I think he got a little taste next year. And look, I mean this in the nicest way possible, but I think it's going to be good for Barron to kind of ease into this a bit and kind of mature a bit with some of the things that you have to do at that position at this level. The preparation, all the things that go with it, because there's no doubt he's very bright, he's very talented, but sometimes it's not a bad thing to kind of ease into something instead of just getting dropped into the deal either. I mean, gotcha. I think not that he was looking for reasons to ease into it, because I think if you told him you're going to be the starter right now, he'd be very excited and he'd give it all he's got and he'd be great at it.
Sure.
But I think if it ends up being to where he's got some time to kind of continue to work on his body and learn and all those things, that's not the worst thing. And I think luckily he's got smart people around him that didn't just say, dude, get out of there, go where you can play. And then you go somewhere where you don't know anybody and you're miserable. This is where he wants to be. And I think that luckily for Texas Tech, he's going to stay here.
Very much so. I'm glad he made that call, and maybe it's not as atypical as I'm making it out to be, or maybe as it feels like to me, just as a fan, that you'd have guys on the move like that. But it seems like quarterbacks specifically, like these dudes will pack the bag and get out of Dodge if the competition is not lining up in the way that they want. And Chris, I hate to even say that in a begrudging way. I don't even know that I mean it that way, because if you think you can play and somebody else wants to give you an opportunity, then get on the field if that's what you want to do. But it does seem atypical, and Barron Morton looks like he's got a world of potential. So I was glad to see that. I feel a little lucky as a Tech fan to be in that position. And as we started this conversation with, or the quarterback portion of it, you better get ready to see multiple guys used in whatever way, again, either intentionally or in an emergency fashion, because that's been mostly your recent history. Man, think about the list of quarterback names that we've seen take a snap or start a game for the Red Raiders in a fairly short amount of time. Chris, can't wait to get into, some actual football where things are happening. So practice one will be in the rear view the next time we get back together, and hope you out there subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you miss nothing. Given the fluid state of, say, a men's basketball program. You want to know what's happening immediately when it happens. So get subscribed on YouTube if you're not already. So you're going to be in that position when it goes down, because I do feel like we're going to hire a coach someday. There's going to be another head coach of Texas Tech men's basketball. It's a Locked On Texas Tech guarantee. Chris, you feel good about that one?
I do, and hopefully it's by the end of this week. So I'm ready for this thing to be to reach a successful conclusion. How about that?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Just like this episode of Locked On Texas Tech. Chris, thanks for the time and insights as always, man. Enjoyed it.
From parts unknown, keep hope alive, people.
That's right. Back with you on the other side. So hope you'll make us your first listen once again right here on Locked On Texas Tech. And for your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball, your one-stop college hoops shop on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you next time around on Locked On Texas Tech.